A minor change with AP 339, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. This is a piece that I know we talked about before, but just clarifying a couple lines in there related to students interacting with their teachers and others.
And Trustee White, you're first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Wilson. I wanted to specifically address AP 339. I think the changes we made are an improvement from its previous form because it's more explicit about staff trying to get the permission from students to share a potential change in their gender identity with their parents. So I think it's positive and it moves in the right direction. However, this AP in its current form still permits students and staff to potentially keep crucial information about a student's mental health secret from their parents or guardians. So I don't think it goes far enough in supporting parental rights, which I unequivocally stand for. I know much of this comes from the BC government, so I don't blame anyone in this room, and I want all students, regardless of how they identify, to feel safe and valued in our schools. Nevertheless, I feel compelled to just voice my moral and philosophical concern regarding the AP as it's currently written.
Okay, Trustee Rugg.
On AP 339, sexual orientation and gender identity expression, I have a similar concern to Trustee White that a student could, on their own in elementary school or middle school, decide on a name and a pronoun that isn't consistent with their biological sex, and if they don't want their parents to know, then the parent wouldn't have to give consent for us as a school district to refer to that student under their chosen name and pronoun. I just don't see that being in the interest of the child and their relationship with the parent. So again, I'd like to make a motion that we require parent consent for us as a school to use that child's requested name and pronoun if it's not consistent with their biological sex and their given name or a short form of their given name.
So I can allow the motion to proceed, keeping in mind that the AP is the purview of the superintendent. It is a simple majority in this case if you have a seconder.
I second the motion.
All right, we have a motion on the table. So I urge everyone to consider this carefully. And again, I will remind the table that we have delegated through policy, which is our policy, board's policy, that the superintendent it's his purview regarding APs. And while you consider that, please also remember that we have to have confidence in our superintendent. I will probably harp on this again. Confidence in our superintendent and the work that he does on our behalf. And this didn't come through as a request, it came through as a motion.
Notwithstanding, I know there's legal concerns, and I'd be willing to sort of put the caveat out there that with that request, we wouldn't want the superintendent or our district to have to do something that's legally impermissible. But I just can't imagine that it's in the best interest of a child 12 years old or younger for the school to affirm their choice to be a different gender from their biological sex without having their parents part of that conversation. I think it's a lonely place for a child to go through that, and I think we should have parental consent in order to move forward that. So that's why I'm suggesting we ask for parental consent. These kids at this age aren't even allowed to go on a field trip without parental consent, and they can't get a job without parental consent.
Yeah, I think Mike's motion actually seems to cut to the heart of sort of the spirit behind it. Like even if his motion maybe isn't reflected in the way AP 339 currently is, I feel like the heart behind it is that we all agree that it would be better for children, especially the very young children, to be able to have this conversation with their parents. But I don't think it should, the way it currently is now, it's kind of up to the child, and it's also up to the teacher sort of communicating with the child. So I like the way this is going, but I can't help but support Mike's motion. I think it's common sense. I think most people in our community and most parents would agree that very young kids should, it really should be parents' permission. I mean, when the parents kind of lend their kids to us, they don't belong to us. So it's not really even our right, in my opinion, to even decide whether to tell the parents or not. It should just be a default. I know that's not how it is. I know there could be some legal issues and stuff, but I philosophically, fundamentally, morally, I believe that's the way it should be. And I know that this actually hasn't been fully tested in law yet. So there really isn't anyone that can say, this isn't right. The extent of parental rights is a discussion happening all over the world right now. It hasn't fully been tested in law. I think when it does get tested, I hope and pray that when it does, our society will say this is common sense and this is right. So for that reason, I have to support this motion.
Thank you, Trustee Peterson.
I'm speaking against the motion. School counselors deal with a bazillion issues, and kids go to them in confidence. But at the same time, I can't think of any examples where they haven't encouraged the parent to be involved in those discussions. I have great faith in our staff in knowing that that's what's best for the kid. But I think it puts confidentiality at risk. I think potentially it could put a counselor or somebody who was disclosed to legally at risk. And for whatever reason, if I were to support it, which I won't, why would we stop at middle school? I mean, our secondary folks have as many concerns as it relates to this issue as any. So I will not support this motion.
I will not be supporting this motion. At times, there's a knee-jerk reaction, I believe, sometimes that we need to tell our staff exactly what to do instead of ask and find out what it is that they think should happen. I have full confidence in our superintendent. I know that from, we all have a copy of the document called Is That Legal? And under the Infant Act, if a young person is deemed to be mature enough to decide medical matters and things like that, then, and there's not an age on that, it's just maturity level. And putting a cap on that rather than the maturity level under the Infant Act, I think we're taking far too great a risk in the confidentiality space, as Trustee Peterson meant, and a lack of trust in our superintendent, and a lack of trust in our educators and our support staff, who all have taken an oath and they all have a code of ethic for their own work that they do. And so I cannot support this. I won't support this. I think it deteriorates some of the trust we have in our system. Trustee Neufeld?
Well, this is motherhood and apple pie, but unfortunately, that's not how the system works. I think this is a provincial issue where there's 60 districts involved. I mean, yes, we could say our superintendent do this. What's the steps of implementing it? Are there legal implications? Are there staffing implications? How do we monitor it? I mean, there's 1,000 questions. I haven't decided yet which way I'm going to vote, but this paints our superintendent into a corner, just like previous conversations we've had.
Thank you, Trustee Kandarajwan.
Yes, thank you. Just going to Trustee Peterson's comment about school counselors. They are obligated by law to keep confidentiality unless the student is harming themselves or harming others. And I was a student in grade school, and I was so thankful for my counselor because there were so many nuances being in high school that I could talk to my counselor. And I'm so thankful, like now that I'm older, that I had a safe space to go to. And I wasn't worried about, okay, is it going to go back to my parents? Because when you're in high school, you just think differently. You just want a sounding board to vent off for, that's all. So I'm also going to be not supporting this.
Thank you, Trustee Kandarajwan. You get the final word. So, Trustee Rai?
I just kept on thinking about this. I see the intent behind it, that like parents should be informed and parents should be, but like the table has been discussing, I don't think so. This will pass the stress test, you want to call it. And I totally agree with Trustee Neufeld that this is a provincial matter or maybe even a federal matter in that case. So in the limited information that I have, I don't think so. This will be helpful to us in any way, so I don't think so. I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Would you like to close? This will be the last speaker before we have the vote.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I would be willing, but I mean, sounds like by way of straw poll here that there's not a lot of support, but I would be willing to amend the motion to state that we would request it only if it's legally appropriate. And then I just wanted to clarify, there seems to be an assumption that we would, if a child came to a counselor in confidence and say, hey, here's how I'm feeling about my sexuality, and sharing that with the counselor, that the counselor would then run to the parent. And that's not what I have in mind. What I'm saying is that the counselor would say, look, young lady, young man, I know you want to do this. In order for us to use this name and this pronoun with you in the school context, we need to have your parents part of this conversation. And if the child really can't get to a place where they don't want the school to tell the parents and get the parents' consent, then the child just remains with their given name and their given pronoun. They're under 12, right? And there's lots of things kids under 12 aren't allowed to do, but want to do. So that's probably all I have to say.
Thank you, Trustee Rauch. We're going to call the vote as it's written. Should you decide in a future meeting to bring it forward for a request for the superintendent to, or the secretary-treasurer to have some legal opinion, it would go to a closed meeting. But at this point, because we don't have a legal on your suggestion, we're just going to move ahead with the motion as presented.
Sure.
Trustee Neufeld, you're in favor? Okay. But Trustee Peterson, there was an error in your vote, is that correct? So the vote does not carry. If you want it on a future agenda item, you'll have to submit the language.
Yep.
So that
Thanks
it,
for letting me have my word. I appreciate it.
Yep.